Hi, I'm Ben McSheffrey and I'm the Technical Training Manager for Symmons Industries. Today, I'll give you an in-depth demonstration on how to replace the TA-4 seat kit in a Symmons Temptrol shower valve. Replacing the seats in a Temptrol valve is relatively simple, and they're most commonly replaced when rebuilding the valve with a new TA-10 spindle. You can replace just the seats, especially if they're damaged or worn. Just make sure you check the condition of the hot and cold washers on the spindle too. Symmons has training videos on every aspect of Temptrol maintenance and repair, including installing a new TA-10 spindle and replacing the TA-9 washer repair kit. Here's an added bonus you may not know about. Did you know that if you rebuild a Temptrol valve with a new TA-10 spindle and new TA-4 seats, you'll automatically reset and renew the warranty, regardless of the age of the valve? That's a deal you won't find anywhere else except Symmons. We're so confident in our products that we stand behind them 100%. Okay, now let's get back to the seats for a minute. You may be installing new TA-4 seats to replace damaged seats or as preventative maintenance. Whatever the case, just be sure to 1. Always replace both the hot and cold seats together, and 2. Use only genuine Symmons parts to avoid damaging the valve or voiding the warranty. Okay, with all of that out of the way, here's what we'll need to replace those seats. A new genuine Symmons TA-4 seat kit, genuine Symmons T35C universal seat removal tools, a 15/16 open-end wrench or large adjustable wrench, a small adjustable wrench, an Allen wrench set, a Phillips-head screwdriver, and if your valve has integral stops, you'll need a large flathead screwdriver. Before we get started, there are 2 very important steps we must follow before disassembling a Temptrol valve. The first step is pretty logical. Turn off the hot and cold water supply lines to the valve. If your Temptrol valve has integral stops, like this, you can shut off the water right at the valve. Just use a large flathead screwdriver and turn each stop in the clockwise direction until it seats. The second step is to open the valve to make sure the water is turned off completely and to release any residual water pressure. But more importantly, you must turn the valve to the fully open position before you begin to disassemble the valve. If you try to disassemble the valve while it's in the closed position, you'll likely do irreversible damage to the valve. Now that the water is off and the valve is open, let's remove the cap assembly and spindle to get to the TA-4 seats. One of the nice features of the Temptrol is that you can repair the valve right from the front. Depending on the trim design, some valves can be repaired just by removing the handle and the dome cover. If your valve has integral stops, you'll need to remove the escutcheon to access them. And some decorative trim designs may limit your access to the cap assembly and spindle, so you may have to remove the escutcheon in that case as well. With the water off and the valve in the open position, we'll remove the handle first. If you have a newer Temptrol trim, the handle is held onto the spindle with a set screw. The Allen wrench size for that screw will either be 1/8 inch or 3/32 inch, depending on the handle style. If you have an older Symmons valve, the handle may be attached by a Phillips-head screw that's under the decorative button. After removing the handle, unscrew the dome cover by turning it counterclockwise. On some older valve designs, the dome cover is held on by a decorative nut. Now the T12A cap assembly and the end of the TA-10 spindle should be visible. Set the handle and the dome cover aside in a safe place, but we'll need the handle in a few minutes, so keep it close by. Now we're ready to remove the cap assembly and the TA-10 spindle, and that's where the 15/16 wrench, or the large adjustable wrench, comes in. Using the wrench flats, loosen the cap assembly from the valve by turning it in a counterclockwise direction. It may take a little bit of force to loosen, especially if you have hard water or if the valve hasn't been serviced in a long time. When it's loose, spin the entire assembly out of the valve. It should spin out easily. If there's any resistance, stop and make sure the valve is in the fully open position. You should end up with the cap assembly and the spindle in your hand as one unit. You'll notice there's a thin fiber gasket that makes the seal between the cap assembly and the valve body. Sometimes it stays with the cap assembly and sometimes it sticks to the valve body. If you're only replacing the seats, you'll need to save that gasket and reuse it, so just set it aside for now. But if you're also replacing the TA-10 spindle or the TA-9 washer kit, a new gasket is included with those parts. Set the cap assembly and spindle aside in a safe place for now. At this point, if you plan to change the TA-10 spindle, you do that now. To remove the seats from a Temptrol shower valve, you'll need the Symmons T35C seat removal tool. Symmons designed this solid steel tool specifically for removing Temptrol seats, so it's clearly the best tool for the job. And the nice thing about it is that it has lugs to remove both the old style and the new style seats, as well as a few other Temptrol parts. So this one tool really does it all. Don't try to use generic seat removal tools or power tools to remove the seats. They'll likely cause more issues than they'll solve. Use only the genuine Symmons seat removal tool. And remember that the seats and the valve body are made of brass, so it typically doesn't take a lot of force to remove them, even if they've been in there for decades. So let's put the tool together and I'll explain how each end works on a Temptrol valve. My first bit of advice has to do with the tool's assembly. It's a heavy solid steel tool, so be careful with it, especially when working with wet hands. It's a good idea to assemble the tool in an area where nothing can be damaged if you drop it, like maybe on a rug or a towel. The tool assembles as a cross by inserting one of the two smallest sections through the larger section, then securing it with the locking pin. Here's a rundown of each of the tool ends. The large hex end is used to remove the new style cold seat. The large square end is used to remove the old style cold seat. The small hex end is used to remove the new style hot seat. And the small square end is used to remove the old style hot seat. The other smaller tool section has a fork on one end and a long, thin hex on the other end. The fork is used to remove the retaining ring that holds the integral stop spindle in place. And the thin hex is used to remove the retainer cap that holds the diverter or volume control cartridge in place on VersaFlex valves. So, since we want to replace the seats, we'll insert the smaller seat tool section through the larger seat tool and insert the pin. Another handy little tip is to wrap the little Velcro strap around the pin to hold it in place, just for a little bit of added security. Now, we're ready to go. It doesn't really matter which seat you remove first, but we've just found it easy to remove the larger cold seat first. This is a new valve, so we'll insert the large hex end and rotate it until it locks in place. For the best leverage, try to position the cross sections at roughly 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock if the valve was a clock face. Keep constant inward pressure, leaning is the best way, and use slow and steady strength to spin the tool counterclockwise. It's important to keep the tool engaged with the wrench points and not to use a jerking motion. That's what damages the wrench points. Just go slow and steady. Okay, the cold seat is loose, so we'll spin that one out fully. And now it's time to remove the smaller hot seat that's deeper inside the valve. Just flip the tool over to the smaller hex end and insert it until it locks into the hot seat. Use the same steady pressure technique to remove the hot seat. With both the seats removed, we'll just reverse the process, starting with the smaller hot seat first. The best way to insert the new seats is to just place them on the tool, then insert it and spin them in. It helps to gently turn the seat counterclockwise until you feel the threads drop together, then spin it in clockwise. The seats just need to be snug, so don't over tighten them. Repeat the same process for the larger cold washer using the large end of the cold seat. Now we can reassemble the valve and test it. Place the thin cap gasket over the spindle and seat it onto the cap assembly. Hold it in place with the tips of your fingers as you hold the assembly. Before reassembling the valve, check the condition of the valve threads and take a look at the seats inside the valve body. Now, carefully thread the cap assembly back into the valve body by hand. Here's an old tip to help you thread it in correctly. Gently turn the assembly counterclockwise until you feel the threads drop together. Then spin it together by hand. It's kind of like cracking a safe. The assembly should spin in easily. If you feel any resistance, stop, check the threads, and try again. Once it spins in freely, use that big wrench again to tighten the cap assembly into the valve. Just make it tight. Don't use any excessive force, power tools, or superpowers. Once it's tight, put the handle back onto the spindle temporarily and turn it clockwise to close the valve. Then, use the small adjustable wrench to snug up that packing nut just a bit. Now that we've installed the new seats and reassembled the valve, we're ready to turn on the water and test our work. Slowly turn the hot and cold water back on and check for leaks. Turn the valve on and let it run, and cycle through the cold range and the hot range to test the temperature. Turn the valve off and check for leaks again. If everything looks good, reinstall the dome cover, the handle, and the escutcheon if you removed it. That's it, you're done. And remember, Symmons has a full suite of maintenance and repair videos to help you keep your Temptrol working like new. If you have any questions related to the maintenance of this or any Symmons product, just give our technical support team a call at 1-800-SYMMONS. On behalf of the entire team at Symmons, thanks and have a great day.